So I'm gonna warn you, if you are a light stomach kind of person, if you get grossed out easily, just be warned going into this movie, you're gonna be looking away at least a few points. Bones and all. Marin, a young woman, learns how to survive on the margins of society. That's a pretty weak synopsis from IMDb, so I'm gonna add a little bit more context. When they say the margins of society, they mean the fact that Marin is a cannibal. She was born with a predisposition to want to eat other humans and their flesh. And while being outcast from the rest of society, she runs into a man named Lee who also has that same predisposition, and they learn to navigate it together throughout this film. Now, if I've got to describe my experience with this movie in one sentence or phrase, I'm going to say that I acknowledge this movie isn't going to be for everybody, and it is a very different, wild, riveting, and at times really grotesque and nasty experience. However, sometimes it can be a little boring, it can be a little slow, but on the whole, I think this movie is a pretty good time. It's thought-provoking, it's provocative, and it'll really get your stomach churning. So let me start off with what I really enjoyed about Bones and All. I thought this movie did an excellent job of building tension at a lot of different scenes. Although I didn't find the conflicts in the movie necessarily prolific themselves, I found that the way that the movie built tension to be quite impressive given that fact. Whether it be with the camera work, whether it be with the sounds, whether it be with the lighting of the scenes, the movie just had a way of getting your skin to kind of crawl. Whether it was like zooming in on the actors' faces, they just did all these techniques, I think, that mounted to something really interesting. Not a whole lot might be happening, however, you can feel your heart kind of pounding out of your chest, and for a scene to be able to do that, I find really impressive. You can't wait to see how each of these scenes is going to play out. It really keeps you engaged, and it just makes the experience a lot more worthwhile. Additionally, I really liked all the performances of our leads, that being Timothee Chalamet, especially Taylor Russell, and also Mark Rylance. Timothee Chalamet is no question a world-class actor, so I'm not too surprised about his performance in this one. He was the most interesting person on screen, and he really sold everything between the relationship between him and Taylor Russell's character and the other conflict that he was involved in. Taylor Russell, I thought, also did a pretty significantly good job being this teenager who is trying to find her way through her predisposition that seems to be supremely unique. And Mark Rylance, although I didn't really like his character, I thought he did a great job of playing this really creepy dude, because he really gives you the creeps at every point he's on screen in this movie. It's really strange. But I'll talk about his character piece in just a second. And additionally, I really like the originality and really provocative themes throughout this movie. The originality comes from the fact that humans are trying to live as cannibals. How do you navigate that particular facet of your life? But I think there's a larger message there about general outcasts in society and how they have to deal with their predispositions and how do they live, how do they get through that on a day-to-day basis. And I thought that movie explored that thought in question pretty well. It touched upon ideas like everybody needs love, everybody needs to survive. Sometimes people have to do things that they themselves have to live with and make themselves feel uncomfortable, but if it's how you survive, do you really have a choice? How do these characters live with themselves? How do they understand themselves? How do they get through the day? These questions are explored in the movie through sufficient depth, and it really made for some interesting viewing. And finally, this movie is really eye-catching, and it uses that to its advantage with the gross cannibalistic nature that it goes through. This movie is not going to shy away from these characters being cannibals. It shows you almost too much at times, to the point where you might get a little squeamish and you might you're not going to feel good. So I'm going to warn you, if you are a light stomach kind of person, if you get grossed out easily, just be warned going into this movie, you're going to be looking away at least a few points. Me, I'm not particularly squeamish, and even I had to look away from the screen at least 2 or 3 times, I believe 3 at least. However, it kept me engaged. It kept the movie extremely interesting at points, even when it lulled at some locations. Now, with all that out of the way, let me get into what I didn't enjoy so much about this movie. To be honest, I thought it had some pacing issues, and it made the film a little boring. I think the strongest pacing aspects of this film come within the first act. It doesn't take long to get going, to establish this world, to establish rules, to establish the characters, which is excellent. However, at some points throughout the movie, I kept asking myself, where is this going? And once we figure out where this is going, can we get there already? Because it does kind of meander a little bit. As I've mentioned earlier, this movie is about these characters trying to explore their predisposition, how they navigate that. However, the movie doesn't make that the most interesting at all times. It fails to create consistent conflict within that, and even when it does create conflict, it doesn't feel believable and it feels really artificial, which is a good transition into Mark Rylance's character Sully. I really didn't like his character at all in this movie. I felt like he was there to perpetuate an artificial conflict that really ultimately didn't have a lot to do with the growth of either of these two characters. That's just my personal take and opinion on it, and I'm keeping it very vague to avoid spoilers. However, I just thought his character, aside from maybe a couple of scenes, was a little pointless. But I feel like they included him just to kind of pad the runtime and to create some sort of additional tension other than what we were already getting. However, it just didn't come across well for me. It didn't really quite work. And one last thing I'll say on the pacing front, I think you start to feel the 2 hours, 8 minutes runtime. This is a bit of a longer movie, and it can just feel a little slow in the second act. So friends, in the end, I'm gonna have to give this movie a 7 out of 10. I think it's a pretty good watch, and it's definitely worth watching. If you're a big fan of gory movies and are looking for something different, a unique and original, this movie's definitely it. However, I acknowledge the fact that this probably isn't for the general movie-going audience, especially if your stomach is really squeamish. Friends, thank you so much for watching another movie review. If you thought this was helpful or liked the video, I'd be honored if you consider clicking the like button, clicking these end cards up above, or the links down in the description below for your viewing pleasure. Once again, I've been Bryson. Until next time, happy Thanksgiving.